Hi, welcome. My name is Dale McCluskey, and on this video I'm going to be discussing the role of influence, the role that it plays between dogs and owners, and the role it plays in the process itself as it relates to creating change. Now this is going to be another technical video. Again, I encourage you to go watch my last video, a technical overview of this system. And so here what I've done is I've transferred over the graph that was in that video, so you can consider the relational dynamics that are playing in the background. Okay, so I talk about outcomes and expectations related to this very popular learning-based roadmap. You'll start to see exactly why it is that expectations can really be diminished based on what's happening via the depth of relationship. Dogs are social relational animals, and these dynamics that are playing in the background and how each of them, the role each plays in terms of expectation, especially if you're following a certain process. Now again, I call out this learning-based narrative as the real problem, and this system of training actually removes it from the process itself. And again, we'll get into this in this video. I'm going to be discussing again some of those dynamics within the system, and specifically the role of influence itself, because again there's a lot of confusion in the dog training world regarding the issue of what's defined as physical force. Again, we'll go through these definitions so that we can come to arrive at a conclusion as to what influence itself, what it represents, how it packages up relationally, how it's defined. And so we can start to remove some of the confusion as it relates to this issue. Now, again, when you're looking to define this issue, you'll hear certain terms used within the dog training world by both what's called balanced dog trainers, and as well as those who approach training as a full-blown learning-based exercise, or people who are referred to as pure positive trainers by balanced trainers. And so some of the words that you'll hear used as physical force by way of physical interactions. Certain specific physical interactions are defined as physical force. Corrections, okay, that's a term that is used within balanced dog training by way of how influence comes online within the interpretive, within the narrative, the approach that's used by way of building a picture. Again, we'll talk about that specifically. Adversive, so the term adversive is used to describe certain techniques, certain methods in certain devices. Okay, so devices themselves will attach to this definition by way of how they manifest influence, how influence is manifested. Again, we'll discuss that a little bit too, in conjunction with the process itself. Now, here's the thing to really consider. Again, I talked about what's going on in the background here. Again, that's something to really keep in mind as this role of the role of influence itself plays, because how it packages up, how it's defined through how the person themselves, it's mind and body. So how it packages up, how it frames up. Again, I talk about this issue of establishing strength and weakness through the depth of, again, relationship through nature itself, how that's defined relationally with dogs within the pack, okay, and certain expectations of what we see through overt physical force. Again, you get into this issue about even where the term, the dominance issue, okay, people talk about dominance, in hierarchy and all these different things, and dogs as pack animals, but again, how this is spun, okay, you'll see this issue of, not just the confusion as to, what physical force the role it plays, but, outright, those who intentionally or not are totally misrepresenting the role or what physical force represents, okay, based on this ideology, this learning-based narrative. Again, the thing to really consider is that whenever someone is pushing forward a certain narrative about what something represents, you have to look at what the default is, what they're actually supporting, use to support certain statements. Again, once you consider the fact that there's a major problem as to how learning theory is applied within the parameters of the of response, and a lack of considering the issues as relates to the control and motives, the levels of control the dog is holding, and what that represents then to response itself as this picture comes together, and the issue about dogs actually going through the motions or holding control even while you have a fantastic looking picture. And again, this is the problem in the dog training world, is understanding what's happening in the background. Okay, what's the depth of what's happening beyond just the appearance of things. This is really important to understand, because again, when you have a certain outcome, and even though you have a certain expectation, those things are not lining up. Okay, they're not mirroring up, and this is where the issue about things looking great in a certain environment and a failure for unwanted behavior issues to diminish. This is what's happening here. Okay, but again, it all comes back to the process. Okay, understanding what the roadmap, what people are investing in, and how these things play off that in the background itself as this picture is taking shape. That's a really important thing to consider. But again, focusing back on this issue of the role of influence, okay, what I show is that influence itself, okay, is required, okay, but it's part of the process in terms of how the process itself, okay, the methodology itself comes online, okay, and how influence itself intersects the method, okay, to create change. Now, the definition of influence, if you look at it relationally, how it packages up, again, getting back to this issue about the depth of relationship, issue of strength and weakness is defined through nature, okay, it really is about the person. All the dominoes fall the same way. So if you think a certain way, you interact a certain way, but the issue about the context of physical force is not some sort of separate act itself, okay, not just the act, okay, it's about relationship. It's relational to dogs. So how it intersects through the individual, okay, this is where if you look at the pattern of how people think, you'll start to see how it is that how things will go a certain way with certain people, and their expectations aren't met in terms of behavioral change based on how they personally, how they think, how they connect with the dog at that level. Dogs, again, share a very profound connection with us at that level. Okay, you'll see how all these things begin to line up, and things will begin to make sense. But again, when you get this issue about, if you go and watch my other video, I'm talking about this, I talk about this relational spectrum, okay, of how, even looking at the issue, the context of balanced dog training, although balanced dog trainers do incorporate certain things in, okay, to their approach, by way of certain devices that represent influence, how influence will manifest through them, as well as what they define as correction. So influence comes online at a certain point within their narrative. But what I show is that if you look at how change happens is defined relationally, okay, and we'll get into that here more in a minute, but how it's defined relationally, how their methodology comes on, it's reactive in nature. Okay, they're waiting, the mind of the dog is escalating up beyond a certain level, and control is manifesting at a level, and then they're bringing influences coming online, okay, to change the state of mind of a dog. Okay, influence manifests. But here, in the context of change, and again I show this, is how influence comes online through the method. Okay, through the relational changing method. It's proactive in nature, which means there's not that delayed point of time. As soon as again, this is being in tune to a deeper level of the dog's mind. As soon as the dog is beginning to invest, as soon as control is beginning to manifest through the state of mind of a dog, influence is happening at those points, what I define as follower moments. Okay, so it's happening in a way that's at a lower level, okay, and wouldn't be defined as a correction. Okay, it'd be defined as moments of influence, are happening, okay, to impact or influence the state of mind of the dog. Okay, this is where you see the head turning inwards at times. And so these moments are changing. So the issue about being objectified and the moments that dog is investing, you'll see that. You'll see exactly the specifics of the methodology. So the head is turning inwards at a certain point. So it's influencing the moment the person's in. Okay, with influencing the state of mind of the dog. But these moments, what they do is they're your building blocks of change as they begin to build on top of each other day after day. Okay, they begin to influence the dog's overall state of mind. Okay, people are wondering, okay, how's behavioral change happening? Okay, that's what's happening. It starts to influence the dog's overall state of mind. The issue of control begins to diminish, and all the behavior issues begin to diminish as well. Okay, that's the role that it plays in that. Now, the problem here in terms of the reactive nature, okay, people are wondering why balanced dog training is problematic, is because of both the reactive nature of influence, okay, the kind of gaps within the method itself, and we'll talk about that more in a second, about the integrity of the method. But at the same time, within the balanced training itself, within that formula, so to speak, within the equation, is this problem with the learning narrative being in that. So again, when you look at balanced dog training, the majority of trainers are in agreement with and employ this learning narrative. Again, if you look at this issue and consider what's happening here, you'll begin to understand why it is that even balanced dog training can be problematic for many, many dogs and owners. But again, so that's incorporated in. So yes, people say, well, balanced dog training has a better result than a pure positive training. That is correct. Okay. However, if you look at the problem with, it still presents a problem, and the other over kind of reaching issue is the fact that if you're approaching training or you're aligning yourself with that learning narrative, by default you're going to have a problem anyway, and you're not going to truly see when there is a problem because of the deceptive nature of how response plays out. Okay, with things looking a certain way even though they're not. Okay, this is really a very important point. And then you get this issue of, once you begin to confusions now in the mix, in the equation, and then you get this issue about, well, these devices, the problems that they can create or generate, okay, with, say, certain devices pivoting off them at a very high level, and then the issue about what is the best device to actually use. I strip things down to, a flat collar, just a standard leash. But again, because it's the methodology, okay, it's about how the method itself aligns a certain way to generate a high-level change through that owner. So just understand, when I'm taking certain things away or adding certain things to this or doing certain things a certain way, it's all very intentional to make sure that you have a certain expectation or a desired outcome. And also at the same time removing this learning narrative from the equation. Now the big question is, and this is very difficult for, I agree with a lot of trainers who follow this learning roadmap to consider what I'm saying, because by default, you immediately people think, well, what's the motivator? Like, I need something because so much has been entrenched into, kind of like, let's build a picture. Like they want to, you want to get the dog to move around. And that, I want people to really, really, I just hammer away at this, the fact about stepping into the process with a dog holding a certain level of control, the relationship being completely sideways, and you jump in like that, just understand that sets up right away by default a major problem. Okay, through that type of assumption that's made on a dog's state of mind via response. Major problem. Okay, so here, to make sure you don't have a problem, okay, you have to look at the motivator being different. You have to look at the process being different. You have to take it to an intervention level, and then through the methodology itself, as the type of language that it speaks, within the parameters, again, even with influence, within the parameters of what's reasonable, okay, with how the method itself intersects in these type of connecting points, okay, the dog comes into agreement with it. So the motivation is through the process itself. And while the dog is coming to agreement with it, change is happening. And then you get this issue of context of control. So when you see me using a leash or how the methodology is coming together, you will see me advocating a high level of control. But the level of control is temporary. Okay, the level of control is specific to the integrity of the method itself to have the desired expectation of a desired outcome. Because all these things, the methodology begins to diminish, the level of control begins to diminish once the picture itself begins to take shape at the at the desired level. But again, the type of influence, okay, looking at the type of influence, again, getting back to this issue about response itself, is that trainers are not looking at the type of influence that's happening between dogs and owners, okay, or the motives themselves, whether or not they're actually aligning. Okay, but again, by defaulting back to making sure the process is proper, identifying the process itself, you're not going to worry, you're not going to have these issues to begin with. So again, just something to consider. I just want to go through this issue of context of influence, is understand that influence itself, it's specific to the methodology. So I talk about bad optics, okay, in terms of the confusion within the parameters of balanced dog training. You'll see certain interactions, okay, that represents how influence is manifesting, and it can be very confusing because this is why you have these issues. But what I would suggest, the real problem is this learning narrative to begin with, and then the confusion kind of comes from that, and then just kind of escalates. So again, I would encourage anyone, if you're looking for answers, check out this system of training. A lot of time went into this. I mean, I'm talking years ago, very, very intentional with how I broke the stuff down and the depth of what's happening. You can see here. But again, it can be, it's not something where, people are going to have confusion. It's a matter of the method itself has proven itself. There's a definite formula that you follow, okay, to make sure that you have a expectation of a desired outcome each and every time. To make sure relational change happens each and every time, and nothing is going to get in the way of that. So again, thanks for watching. Hope you have a great day.